were studying Lucretius with Donald Wormel. He was a professor of Latin at the time. We read through the first lines of the poem and he came to, I think it was line 18, and he stopped and said in his rather halting voice, this is the most beautiful line in the whole of Latin poetry. And we perked up at this, of course, and we better write this down. This is the most beautiful line of poetry, of Latin poetry there is. But later on he came to another line and stopped and said, this is the most beautiful line of poetry in all of Latin literature. We began to think, oh no, hold on, he's losing it. He forgot. Line 18 was the most beautiful line. And it cropped up again, and then we knew what he was doing. He was indicating his absolute fascination and love of the poem.
Scholars have been handling ancient texts for centuries. Line of Enquiry treats these texts in a different way. What we have here are leading scholars choosing just one line from an ancient author and justifying that choice on one side of paper. Each is a manifesto. You start with a single line of Greek or Latin, and you end with an insight into who these authors were, why they wrote what they did, and why it matters to us.
Well, I chose the last line of the Iliad of Homer, one of the greatest expressions of man's intellectual ability, really. Hos hoi ge amphiapon taphon Hectoros hippodamoia. Such was the funeral they held for Hector, tamer of horses. I remember as a postgraduate student at the University of Toronto reading it, and I'd read the whole poem in Greek, all in one go. Well, it took a certain amount of time. And coming to the end of the poem, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but I do remember really the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I thought that this was the end of something extraordinary, especially after the violence of Achilles and all the fighting. It was an extraordinary moment of peace and reconciliation. And that was, I remember, what struck me as a graduate student, and that might have been the difference, actually, between being an undergraduate and a postgraduate, the situation in Northern Ireland, particularly. In the 1970s, it was particularly bad, a grim period in which there didn't seem to be any hope of reconciliation or peace, of people living together in some sort of civilized way. And yet here was a time of terrible violence with people treating each other appallingly. And then the father of Hector going to Achilles, the main Greek killing machine, and saying, give me the son, the body of my son back. And Achilles yields.
Okay, so I have chosen Lucretius, Book 5, Nubila solim braesnix venti fulmina grando, mist, sun, rain, snow, winds, lightning and hail. This line comes from a context where Lucretius is talking about the invention of religion, which to him was a terrible thing, a complete disaster. And he describes how early human beings, primitive human beings, looked around them and saw all these phenomena that they couldn't explain. And so they resorted in saying, oh, it must be the gods doing it. And I think this line in particular wonderfully conveys this sense of perplexity. We've just got these phenomena hitting us from all sides. There's the sun, there's the hail, there's the lightning. What are we going to do with it?
One of the main jobs of the classicist is to read the authors and open the door to new worlds. From ancient commentators to notes in the margins of medieval manuscripts, through generations of scholars ever since, that brief has stayed the same.
Choosing one line is actually rather good.
We all have our own elements of aspects of ancient literature that we're passionate about. Otherwise, why would we be doing this?
It somehow encapsulates emotional response or just captures what moved your soul. That enough?